The following disclaimer is for those in California only. Pursuant to California Assembly Bill 2571, it is illegal for the advertisement and or marketing of any firearm-related products and or programs in a manner that is designed, intended, or reasonably appears to be attractive to minors. As such, if you are currently in California, this program is restricted to only those that are over 18. Please turn this program off now if you are in California and under 18. Now, on to the program. Hello and welcome to the CenterTens podcast. CenterTens is a podcast that discusses small bore and precision air rifle from junior shooting sports on up to NCAA collegiate and Olympic competition. And now here's your host, Adam Pearson. Hello and welcome back to CenterTens. This week's competitions in the NCAA has been one of many records set. Several schools have set aggregate records, personal records, things like that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first match we're going to look at is the Withrow Invitational. It was 5 different teams competing at Murray State in Murray, Kentucky. The standings were Murray State was in first with an aggregate of 47-17. Kentucky was second with 47-12. Jacksonville State was third with a team record score of 47-03. North Georgia was fourth with 46-57. And Alabama Birmingham was fifth at 45-86. Murray State shot a 23-38 small bore and 23-79 air. Kentucky had a 23-32 small bore, 23-80 air. Jacksonville State, 23-38 small bore, 23-65 air. North Georgia set a small bore team record of 23-04, an air score of 23-53. Alabama Birmingham small bore was 22-63. And an air of 23-23. The top shooters for this match for Murray State, you had Scott Patterson with an 1181. Kentucky was Sophia Cicerello with an 1187. For Jacksonville State, you had Franz Rasmussen, also with an 1181. For North Georgia, you had Alyssa Walter, also had an 1181. And Alabama Birmingham's top shooter was Amy Cohan with an 1158. The scoring teams for Murray State, small bore, we had 3 585s. So you had Scott Patterson, Allison Henry, and John Blanton. All had 585s. And you had a lock quarter with a 583. And in air, you had a pair of 596s from Scott Patterson and Matthias Kiru, a 594 from Allison Henry, and a 593 from John Blanton. Kentucky scoring teams for small bore, you had Sophia Cicerello with a 589. Braden Pizer with a 582, Emmy Sellers with a 581, and Martin Voss with a 580. Their air team was Sophia Cicerello with a 598, Braden Pizer with a 595, Allison Buessler with a 594, and Emmy Sellers with a 593. Jacksonville State's scoring teams, small bore, you had Franz Rasmussen with a 588, Sam Burrow with a 585, Clark McWhorter with a 584, and Lars Lillinge with a 581. Then their air team, again, was Franz Rasmussen with a 593. Sam Burrow also had a 593. Annie Iannotti with a 590. And Lars Lillinge with a 589. North Georgia's teams, their small bore was Alyssa Walter with a 587. Alyssa Yancey shot a personal record of 581. Maya Cameron with a 577. And Courtney Allison with a 559. For their air team, Alyssa Walter with a 594. Then we had a pair of 589s from Maya Cameron and Jaden Frazier. And Alyssa Yancey had a 581. And then Alabama Birmingham's scoring teams for small bore. You had Amy Cohan with a 576. Christopher Comstock shot a personal record of a 572. Brenton Lang with a 558. And Megan McLaughlin with a 557. For air, you had Gracie Turk with a 584. Amy Cohan with a 582, Megan McLaughlin with a 581, and Brent Lang with a 576. The next match of the weekend was held at Annapolis, Maryland at Navy. It was Alaska Fairbanks versus Navy. Alaska Fairbanks topped that with a 47-12 to Navy's 46-95. Alaska shot a 23-35 small bore, 23-77 air versus Navy's 23-26 small bore, 23-69 air. Top shooters for the match was Rachel Charles for Alaska with a 11-85, and Navy's top shooter was Isabella Baldwin with an 11-81. The scoring teams for Alaska for small bore was Rachel Charles with a 5.87, Sarah Karasova with a 5.84, Akito Shimizu with a 5.83, and Elijah Spencer with a 5.81. The air team was Rachel Charles with a 5.98, Elijah Spencer with a 5.94, Sarah Karasova also had a 5.94, and Akito Shimizu with a 5.91. Navy's teams for small bore, you had Marley Duncan with a 5.87, Isabella Baldwin with a 5.86, Ryan Wee with a 5.78, and Clarissa Leyland with a 5.75. Their air team, Isabella Baldwin with a 5.95, Clarissa Leyland with a 5.94, Marley Duncan with a 5.92, and Deontay Hayes with a 5.88. The third match of the weekend, it was West Virginia against Army. West Virginia topped that one with a 47-39 to Army's 46-93. WVU shot a small bore score of 23-62 and an air rifle score of 23-77 to Army's 23-31 small bore and 23-62 air. The top shooters this match, you had West Virginia with Griffin Lake with an 11.85, and Army's top shooter was Anusha Packham with an 11.75. The scoring teams, small bore for West Virginia, you had Matt Sanchez with a 5.92. Mallory Brown also had a 5.92. Then you had a pair of 5.89s, one for Griffin Lake and one for Natalie Perrin, which tied her personal record. In air, Griffin Lake shot a 5.96. Molly McGinn with a 5.95. Natalie Perrin with a 5.94. And Gavin Barnick with a 5.92. Army's teams for small bore, you had Chris Jennings with 5.88. Kyle Cutts with a 5.83. Anusha Packham with a 5.82. And Briggs Moore with a 5.78. Their air team, Briggs Moore shot a 5.95. Anusha Packham shot a 5.93. Ashton Arlington shot a 5.88. And Chris Jennings shot a 5.86. Then we're going to move to Akron. Morehead State traveled to Akron and competed. Akron topped that match with a 46-93 aggregate to Morehead's 46-37. Akron had a small bore score of 23-24 and an air of 23-69. Morehead had a 22-94 small bore and a 23-43 air. The top shooters, Gavin Prokowski for Akron with an 11.79. And for Morehead, you had Bryce Ward with an 11.64. The scoring teams, Akron was Aaron Schnupp, had a 5.85 small bore. Gavin Prokowski had a 5.84. Lex Kirk with a 5.79. And Brendan Seitz with a 5.76. Akron's air team, Lex Kirk had a 5.97. Gavin Prokowski had a 5.95. Natalia Seek with a 5.89. And Andrew DeRoss with a 5.88. Morehead's teams, for small bore, you had Bryce Ward with a 5.80. Holly Freeman with a 5.73. Maria Koenig with a 5.71. And Cassidy Wilson with a 5.70. For air, you had Hayden Bell with a 5.88. Cassidy Wilson with a 5.86. Adriana Beard with a 5.85. And Bryce Ward with a 5.84. The fifth match, we saw Georgia Southern traveling to Nebraska. Georgia Southern topped that one with a 47-25 to Nebraska's 47-02. Georgia Southern had a 23-47 small bore and a 23-78 air to Nebraska's 23-28 small bore and 23-74 air. The top shooters, you had Emma Pullman for Georgia Southern with an 11.88 and Cecilia Aussie with an 11.87 for Nebraska. Emma Pullman also set the school aggregate record with that 11.88. So Georgia Southern small bore team, Emma Pullman with a 5.90. Then we saw a pair of 5.89s from Ella Goldfaden and Addie Burrow. And then we had a 5.79 from Zahara Gonzalez-Mezo. Their air team, Emma Pullman with a 5.98. Bremen Butler with a 5.94. And Addie Burrow and Ella Goldfaden both shot 5.93s. Nebraska's team, you had small bore Cecilia Aussie with a 5.90. Emma Rode with a 5.85. Madeline Erickson with a 5.77. And Mackenzie Strauch with a 5.76. For air, Cecilia Osley shot a 597. Then we had a pair of 594s from Emma Road and Mackenzie Strouch. And Charlotte Mick came in with a 589. The next match, we saw UT Martin versus Alabama Birmingham. UT Martin topped that one with a 46-29 to Alabama Birmingham's 45-81. UT Martin shot a 22-99 small bore and a 23-30 air to Alabama Birmingham's 22-66 small bore and 23-15 air. The top shooters, you had Elena Walther for UT Martin with an 11.72, and Alabama Birmingham's top shooter was Megan McLaughlin with an 11.48. The scoring teams, UT Martin small bore was Elena Walther with a 5.85, Joseph Kovac with a 5.77, Nicholas Fares with a 5.75, and Jesse Chamberlain with a 5.62. Their air team was Elena Walther with a 5.87, Nicholas Fares with a 5.86, Joseph Kovac with a 5.81, and Arby Summers with a 5.76. For Alabama Birmingham, their small bore team was Amy Cohan with a 5.69. Megan McLaughlin shot a personal record of a 5.68. Christopher Comstock shot a 5.67. And Gracie Turk shot a 5.62. For air, Gracie Turk shot a 5.82. Megan McLaughlin shot another personal record at 5.80. Brent Ling also shot a 5.80, and Christopher Comstock shot a 5.73. The next match we're going to look at, we saw VMI versus Wofford. VMI shot a 46-10 to Wofford's 44-09. VMI's small bore score was a 22-75 to a 23-35 air versus Wofford's 21-51 small bore and 22-58 air. The top shooters was for VMI was Christopher Hicks with an 11.70 and Garrett Dahl with an 11.21. The scoring teams for VMI small bore team was Christopher Hicks with a 5.80, Ryan Harlow with a 5.69, Michael Anesi with a 5.67, and Zachary Maliello with a 5.59. Their air rifle team was Christopher Hicks with a 5.90, Philip Frey with a 5.86, Ryan Harlow with a 5.83, and Caitlin Gorichowski with a 5.76. Wofford scoring teams for small bore was Ainsley Brooks Springer with a 5.49, Garrett Dahl with a 5.44, Charlie Yang with a 5.37, and Chanson Bullard with a 5.21. Their air team was Garrett Dahl with a 5.77, Ainsley Brooks Springer with a 5.70, Chanson Bullard with a 5.57, and Charlie Yang with a 5.54. Then we saw Air Force versus Citadel at the Citadel. Air Force shot a 47-16 to Citadel's mixed team of 46-25 and Citadel women's team of 43-51. Air Force shot a small bore score of 23-39 and 23-77 air. The Citadel mixed team shot a 2300 small bore and a 23-25 air. And the women's team shot a 21-23 small bore and a 22-28 air. The top shooters for the match, for Air Force, we had a tie between Lauren Hurley and Morgan Krebs with an 11.80. Citadel's top shooter for the mixed team was James Hart IV with an 11.74. And the women's team was Megan Mix with 11.27. For the scoring teams, Air Force's small bore, we saw Lauren Hurley with a 5.90, Scott Rocket with a 5.85, Morgan Krebs with a 5.84, and Panaya D'Souza with a 5.80. Their air rifle team was Panaya D'Souza with a 5.97, Morgan Krebs with a 5.96, Scott Rocket shot a 5.94, and Lauren Hurley brought it around with a 5.90. For the Citadel mixed team, you had James Hart IV with a 5.90, Carson Wood with a 5.76, Charlotte Welsh with a 5.70, and Daniel Shapiro with a 5.64. Their air team, Charlotte Welsh shot a 5.92, James Hart IV with a 5.84, Dalton Bodite with a 5.79, and Carson Wood with a 5.70. And the Citadel mixed team, for small bore, Michaela Martin with a 5.48, Megan Mix with a 5.47, Deanna Douglas with a 5.34, and Emma Goldman with a 4.94. And then in air, Megan Mix shot a 5.80, Michaela Martin with a 5.64, Deanna Douglas with a 5.50, and Emma Goldman with a 5.34. Then we're going to move on to Sunday. We saw TCU traveling to Ohio State. TCU topped that match with a 47-30 to Ohio State's new team record of 47-17. TCU shot a 23-53 small bore, 23-77 air to Ohio State's 23-44 small bore, 23-73 air. The top shooters for TCU, we had Stephanie Grunso with an 11.91. And for Ohio State, we had Victor Kiss with an 11.85. The scoring teams, TCU's small bore was Stephanie Grunso with a 5.94. Nicole Hogan with a 5.88. Nina Schuett with a 5.86. And Stephanie Allen with a 5.85. For air was Stephanie Grunso with a 5.97. Nina Schuett with a 5.95. Stephanie Allen with a 5.93. Nicole Hogan with a 5.92. Ohio State's teams, you have Victor Kiss with a 5.90 in small bore, followed by Derek Kaiser with a 5.89, Paige Hollowell with a 5.86, and Adrienne Hansen with a 5.79. And for air, you have Victor Kiss with a 5.95, as well as Derek Kaiser with a 5.95. Right behind them was Paige Hollowell with a 5.94, and Adrienne Hansen rounded it out with a 5.89. The next match, you saw Air Force versus the Citadel women's team. Air Force topped that one with a 47-22 to Citadel women's 43-88. Air Force shot a 23-47 small bore, 23-75 air to the Citadel women's of a 21-52 small bore and 22-36 air. The top shooters for Air Force was Scott Rocket with an 11.85. Citadel women's team was Megan Mix with an 11.15. The scoring teams, Air Force, you had Scott Rocket, 5.89 small bore, Panaya D'Souza with a 5.87, Morgan Krebs with a 5.86, and Lauren Hurley with a 5.85. Then their air rifle team was Scott Rocket with a 5.96, Panaya D'Souza with a 5.94, Lauren Hurley with a 5.93, and Morgan Krebs with a 5.92. The scoring teams for the Citadel women's team, Deanna Douglas shot a 5.53 in small bore, followed by Megan Mix with a 5.48, Michaela Martin with a 5.29, and Emma Goldman with a 5.22. Their air teams was Michaela Martin with a 5.81, Megan Mix with a 5.67, Deanna Douglas with a 5.56, and Emma Goldman with a 5.32. Then we saw Army versus North Georgia at WVU. Army shot a 46-79 to North Georgia's 46-43. Army had a 23-30 in small bore and a 23-49 air to North Georgia's 22-97 small bore and 23-46 air. The top shooters for Army, you had Anisha Packham with an 11.72. And for North Georgia, you had Alyssa Walter with an 11.73. The scoring teams, Army small bore team was Anisha Packham with a 5.84. Then you had a pair of 5.83s from Kyle Cutts and Claudia Siegel. And Chris Jennings rounded it out with a 5.80. And then in air, you had Briggs Moore with a 5.92. Then we had another pair of 5.88s from Anisha Packham and Claudia Siegel. And then Chris Jennings with a 5.81. For North Georgia, in small bore, you had Alyssa Walter with a 5.82. Alyssa Yancey, a 5.76. Maya Cameron with a 5.73. And Courtney Allison with a 5.66. In air rifle, North Georgia's team was Alyssa Walter with a 5.91. Maya Cameron with a 5.86. Courtney Allison with a 5.85. And Jaden Frazier finished it out with a 5.84. The last match of the weekend, again, was at Annapolis. We saw, again, Alaska Fairbanks versus Navy. Alaska Fairbanks topped that one with a 47-24 to Navy's 47-04. Alaska shot a 23-44 in small bore and a 23-80 in air to Navy's 23-36 small bore, 23-68 air. The top shooters for the day, for Alaska Fairbanks, you had Rachel Charles with an 11.86 and Isabella Baldwin for the Navy with an 11.81. The scoring teams, in Alaska Fairbanks small bore, you had Sarah Karasova with a 5.89, Rachel Charles with a 5.88, Elijah Spencer with a 5.84, and Akito Shimizu with a 5.83. Their air rifle team was Rachel Charles with a 5.98, Akito Shimizu with a 5.95, Elijah Spencer with a 5.94, and Sarah Karasova with a 5.93. And then you had the Navy small bore with a Isabella Baldwin shot a 5.88, as well as Marley Duncan shot a 5.88. Stephanie Millavane with a 5.82, and Ryan Wee with a 5.78. Their air team was Isabella Baldwin with 5.93. Then you had Clarissa Leyland and Marley Duncan both with 5.92s, and Deontay Hayes rounded it out with a 5.91. So this coming week, we got, and again, another busy weekend. We got 12 different matches. We got Murray State versus Memphis, Akron and Navy, and versus West Virginia, all traveling to Annapolis to compete at Navy. You had Jacksonville versus Morehead State at Morehead. Ole Miss traveling to Army. You had VMI traveling to the Citadel. Nebraska traveling to UTEP. And then North Georgia versus Wofford. That was all on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we got Ohio State traveling to Air Force. Nebraska and UTEP again. TCU versus the Citadel. UT Martin versus Memphis. And Ole Miss versus John Jay. So that'll be it for this week. And as we like to say every week, the most important shot is always the one that is in front of you. Thank you for listening to Season 1 of CenterTens. If you like the show, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This helps out tremendously. Give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook at CenterTens. CenterTens can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Pocket Cast, and at centertens.com. Hope you join us for our next episode.